Hello, Year 11. In case you didn't know, it's Mr. Ripley. But I've gone all strange and wild during lockdown. Actually, I haven't. That's just one of our garden ornaments. I usually record these videos just like kind of on the day when I put them on YouTube for you. Sometimes a couple of days before, but as you may notice, it is fairly snowy at the minute. So I'm going to record just a little bit of this day's lesson topic, just to demonstrate with the snow. So it'll just be a short clip. But what we're doing about now is we're talking about adaptation. Is that the right way around? Yeah. So we're talking about adaptations. So that is how living things have characteristics that help them to survive in the environment that they live in, and how they help them to survive. And what's really important in year 11 is you don't just know what features they've got, but how they help them to survive. So I've brought a couple of little animals out here with me. So I'm going to place this one just on here. So here we've got a penguin. And so penguins live in the Arctic, as you may know. Now, the conditions in the Arctic are very cold all of the year round. Penguins get their food from the water, so the water is very, very cold. So the penguin is adapted to survive in its habitat, so in the Arctic, and in cold environments in the northern hemisphere. And what you'll find is that it has features, it has characteristics. I'll just spin it around like a catwalk model. It's got characteristics that help it to survive, and they're what we call adaptations. So if you might notice here that it's quite a chunky penguin, and what happens is during the summer months when there's more food available, penguins eat an enormous amount of fish and store some of the energy and nutrients from that as fat. So what they can do is they can then, during the winter when there's less food available, the seas are frozen over, so they can't necessarily get as close access to them. What happens is that fat gets broken down and it keeps them alive during that those winter months. So that's an adaptation that it has, so it can store fat for when it needs it during the winter months when food is scarce. It's also got a very streamlined body. So if it just pokes its head first, it dives into the water and it swims along, and it'll stick its beak out so it's straight. So it's a bit shaped like a bullet, and that helps it. That's an adaptation because it means that it can move quickly through the water to catch its prey. So it feeds on fish. This is an emperor penguin, I think. It feeds on fish, and the fish are really, really fast in the water. So the better able our penguin is to catch them, then the better it is for them. So they'll be able to survive and pass those characteristics on off to their offspring. And also they've got webbed feet, which help in terms of pushing the water behind them, so they can swim really, really fast, and therefore are able to catch their prey. So what we've talked about there is we've talked about the adaptation and how it helps it. So it can store fat for the times of year when food's scarce. It's streamlined, so it can swim fast through the water to catch its prey, and it's got webbed feet, and what that does is that helps it to swim through the water quickly. It's also got a beak that's shaped ideally for catching fish out of the water, because it's above the head. It's set apart from the head, so it can catch it anywhere within that part of its beak. So that helps it to survive as well. So if you can see from there, I've talked about the adaptation, so what feature it has and how it helps it to survive. And it's important you don't just say that it's, you know, got a bullet-shaped body or it's got webbed feet. You have to say how that helps it. Now, the other thing as well is that fat store. And again, you can see that this is obviously just an end of summer one. And summer in the Arctic is still really cold and there's loads of snow and ice. But what happens is you'll see that that fat store also keeps it warm. So when it's in the water, the fat store will keep its internal organs warm. So its heart, its lungs, its liver, its kidneys, all of those things, the organs that it needs, it'll keep those warm. And also it's the penguin's skin makes a kind of like waterproof oil that coats its feathers. So what that does is that means that the water doesn't stick to them, and that means that they're less likely to get cold and unfortunately die, and that's how they survive. So what else have we got? We've got here we've got a walrus. So a walrus is obviously shaped differently to our penguin, but is in the snow. So these things here have got a very strong tail. It's on this model, it's like
looped underneath. I don't know if you can see it, but it's like sitting on its tail, and really powerful flippers, and that helps it to swim through the water quickly in order to catch its prey, which is also fish. But what you'll see is it's got these big long tusks, and those tusks are used to try and get a lady a, a lady walrus. So they're used to fight with other walruses for mates. So again, not friends. It's about fighting to be able to reproduce, but also it can be used to scare other animals away that might be predators, and they can be absolutely massive, these things. Some of them can be as like the weight of like a couple of horses, so they're really, really bulky, but they've also got skin that produces that oily kind of stuff, and it just coats their skin. It doesn't have feathers, but it can be used to support them with that, and it's got fat stores that it can use to keep it warm when it's in the sea, as well as to help it when there isn't much food around later on in the year. So we've got those adaptations and how they help it to survive. Now we've also got a seal, and you find seals all over the world. So we've got a seal here, very similar to the sea lion, very similar to the walrus in terms of shape and in terms of adaptations, but much smaller and without the tusks. And that's because they don't need the tusks to attract mates, because actually there are a lot more of them. There's a lot more available, but they have the same kind of slimline shape, and instead of having a tail, they've got feet here and here, and they've got flippers here and here, and those four things together enable it to swim fast through the water so that it's able to collect its food. So that's an adaptation and how it helps it to survive. Now I've just brought out, just to quickly illustrate, a couple more. Now this is a camel. Okay, now camels can survive in cold climates, but they don't have the adaptations to survive in cold climates. Their adaptations are more about surviving in hot, dry conditions. So the humps that you can see here. So this is a two-humped camel, so we call that a dromedary, right? So this two-humped camel, in those humps you'll find a store of fat, and fat contains water as part of the fat molecule. So what it can do is, if it's trekking through the desert and it needs some water so it can survive, then its body breaks that fat down and releases that water, so it can go for days and days without any access to water, which might otherwise kill it. And it's also got long eyelashes to stop sand from getting it into its eyes, so it can still see. It's got great big hooves, and what they do is they act a little bit like a snowshoe. So polar bears also have these, but I couldn't find a polar bear toy for some reason inside. We've got one somewhere. But what that does is that stops them from sinking into the sand. But this is not adapted for specifically for this kind of climate, although some camels do live in areas of the world, surprisingly, where there is snow, but it's not all of the time, okay? So we've got those things in terms of that. And then last of all, we've got a snake. Now, this is just a black and white garter snake, not a real one, because I wouldn't have just chucked it like that if it was. Now, what you'll find is that you don't find snakes in very cold environments like this, because they're cold-blooded creatures and they rely on the sun and the temperature of things like rocks that they lie on to keep them warm, because they're cold-blooded. So what they do is they've evolved and adapted to warmer climates, and you wouldn't find snakes in snowy places, or if they lived somewhere like this where it snows every now and then, they would find somewhere warm, usually underground, because if you bury underground, then that's a lot warmer than it is on the surface, and they would wait in there for the temperature to go up. And what snakes have got is they've got a very long backbone that's got lots and lots of joints in it, and they're much more flexible than our spine. So what the snake can do is the snake can move and change direction and move much more quickly as it slides across the ground. So that helps it to escape from predators, but also that helps it to catch its prey. So that's another adaptation. So I just thought I'd bring you out in the snow, show you a couple of examples of animals in action as I knock them over. So the camel's obviously cold and it's knackered, and it's unfortunately fallen over, and we've got our other ones there. So what you might find is that camels can survive in habitats like this one, like a snowy one, but they would tend to just be in those for short periods of time. They wouldn't live all the time in those conditions, whereas something like a penguin and a walrus and a seal would live in cold habitats all of the time, and therefore their adaptations would have to be able to support them in terms of living. So remember, really important thing, and we'll have a look at some more animals in a separate video, but the important things are that animals and plants, and we're going to talk about plants next lesson, animals and plants have adaptations that help them to survive in their habitat, in their environment, and you have to say the feature that it's got, the characteristic, and how it helps it to survive. So why does a polar bear have white fur? A polar bear has white fur so that it's camouflaged, so it can sneak up on its prey. So that's what it's got. That's how it helps it to survive. And I'm sure I've got a polar bear in there somewhere, so I'll try and dig that out. But I hope you're all right. I've come out here in the snow because I love the snow, and we will continue our lesson later on. So any questions, just come back to Teams and let me know.